Hello, guys. What's up? Welcome back to the Frontline Youth Podcast, and welcome for the first time, as you heard in the little intro there, to the Pastor's Perspective.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
I'm pretty excited. Right now, I'm talking with, of course, my co-host Elijah.
What's up, yo?
Who is not a pastor.
Nope.
Maybe one day. Who knows?
We'll talk about it. Kind of. Not really. Not me, but we'll talk about that. Anyway, you'll hear it.
So we're just letting y'all know Elijah's in the studio with us. But notice how I said us. We have someone else in the studio with us today.
Drum roll, please. Are you doing a drum roll?
No, I'm not doing a drum roll.
I'm asking the listeners.
Uh-oh. It's Pastor Edward Tijero, also known to me as my dad.
Myself as well. Hello, Father. How are you?
Good. How you guys doing?
Good.
They're probably good. Oh, he's asking us? Oh.
He's asking the listeners.
I don't know.
He doesn't know.
Were you
to
asking
talk
us
to
or the listeners?
I missed what you said.
Were you asking us how we're doing or the listeners how they're doing?
I was asking you guys, definitely.
Oh, okay. Do not comment how you're doing. Apparently he doesn't. No, I'm just kidding. All right.
You guys you're so bro.
Anyway, look.
You about to be replaced permanently.
Yeah, y'all get to skip out on all these shenanigans because we have a
serious guest today.
Serious guest.
Our
yes.
first guest.
Oh yeah,
which is awesome. Not our first studio audience, but our first guest.
And it's going to be our first time publishing a podcast episode.
Pastor's Perspective.
Oh, that too. Yes. And a podcast episode that's done virtually. Me and Isaiah are not in the same room right now. We are actually like an hour and a half apart right now. Yeah,
we are.
Yes. So there was an attempt before. We won't have to talk about it, but it got deleted for a different episode. That was so yeah. This is it right now. This is the real thing.
Nice. Exposing the failures of what we're doing.
But yeah, so y'all, I will not be on here talking too much. I will leave it to the two of them so they can have their conversations in full without a hindrance. So y'all better look forward to it. I'm looking forward to it. Also, I'm listening in.
Here we go. So hello, Pastor Edward Tijero.
Hello, son Isaiah Tijero. I see you all the way in Chapel Hill.
I know. So not everybody knows you that's listening, I'm sure. So you should probably introduce yourself.
Well, hello, my name is Pastor Ed Tijero. Been pastoring now for 17 years. I've pioneered, been a missionary to the nation of Guyana. I've assisted in my mother church in Newport News, and now I currently pastor a church in Spring Lake, North Carolina. I've been here since the year 2018.
Nice. We've been here a long time. Well, I'm not there now, but yeah, home base. Something I just noticed in what you said there that I feel like we should clarify really quickly is that you said that you pioneered.
Yes.
For the listeners, what does that mean?
To pioneer is to blaze a trail, kind of just get started, to start something from scratch, from the beginning, something to begin something that obviously to build something from the ground up, something that wasn't there before. Are you telling me
the definition of pioneer?
I am. Is that what you were asking me?
No. As a pastor, what does that mean?
What does that mean?
Someone says, I pioneered something.
Okay, so I'm explaining. Okay, so to pioneer is you go out, you and your spouse, and you go out and build a church. You go into another city and you just build a church from the beginning, just you and your wife and your children, if you have children. And you guys had that experience.
Okay. Oh,
Wait,
hold on.
as far as pioneering goes, what makes that different from just, let's say you're already in a church and then you become the pastor of it, or you become an assistant pastor, you take over something that's already there?
Well, the difference being, if you take over a church, there's people there. When you're pioneering, there's nobody there except for
Right.
you and your family and your kids, and you're believing God to build a church, by outreaching and evangelism, lots of prayer, that the church will begin to grow one soul at a time.
Awesome. I'm still laughing because you were telling me the definition of pioneer.
So what is
according to
pioneer?
Webster?
Yeah.
Oh, that was funny.
Oh man.
Oh, that was funny. Okay, so pioneering has to do with pastoring, which is obviously the reason you're here. For the pastor's perspective, is we want to get a pastor's perspective. I know, pretty clever with that name.
Yes.
You came up with it. So when you are a pastor, right? Like, let's say, I guess the question is, right, a lot of people want to be pastors, a lot of people want to preach and save souls, start churches, and a lot of that. But in terms of, is it mandatory? You know what I mean? I feel like a lot of people, they think that to be a good Christian, or to be, I don't know, effective in church, it's like either I'm always doing something so that I'm on my way to being a pastor. You know what I mean? And I'm not sure if that's the end goal for everybody. You know what I mean? Is that what everyone has to do? You have to be a pastor?
Well, no. Pastoring is definitely a calling. And sometimes, people see the pastors, especially in our fellowship, they kind of see them as the heroes. They see them, that's who they see on the platform, and sometimes they aspire to be like who they're listening to, and they see them ministering, and maybe doing something for God, and so a lot of times people desire to do that, but pastoring is definitely a call, and it's not everyone.
Right. So I'm glad you mentioned that it's not everyone. In terms of that, who is it? You know what I mean? Is there something that maybe someone has that like makes sense to be a pastor, or it's like, I don't know, is there like something there or something to it?
Well, it's definitely a calling. It's not like this job, like, I'm going to go to school and I'm going to do this and I just want to be a pastor. It's definitely something that you need God's involvement, and it is
For sure.
And it is a call upon your life. I mean, for my own life, I never would have thought I was going to be a pastor. It was not even a thought in my mind. I was just, a drug user, an alcoholic, just living
Crack.
a crazy, no,
Not crack. Okay.
living a crazy life. And, I got saved, gave my life to Christ. And then, as in the process of just living for Christ and falling in love with Jesus, actually my first pastor actually came up to me and told me, that God had spoke to him, that said that I'm going to be a preacher. I said, okay, that's nice. He didn't tell me anything, and I was just in love with Christ. I didn't really grow up in church, but I just fell in love with the gospel and just living my life. But then, I'm not going to say that I heard God's voice, like, you're going to be a pastor, or that God gave me some dream or anything like that. But it was just, in my spirit, I knew this is the call upon my life. This is, what I'm going to do. I'm going to, give my heart and be a pastor.
Yeah. Cool. So there is something more to it than just like meeting some qualifications or like checking a box or something like that. Like you have to, right? Exactly. Just a question for you. Obviously, you didn't go out and be a pastor by yourself. You had to bring mom or Diani Tijero to you guys, but she's my mom. You had to bring mom with you. This is random. This is off script, but how was that for like getting mom to come with you? Was it like she was just like, yeah, you want to be a pastor? I'm on the way.
No, which goes into prior to that. So yes, we do launch out couples. And a lot of times people forget that. People are like, oh, that all the men were called to be pastors and stuff like that. But, especially in our fellowship, we don't just launch out the men, we launch out couples. And so, it's not just checking the boxes, but, definitely, a healthy marriage, you have a prayer life, et cetera, because it is something spiritual. Again, like you said, it's not checking the boxes. It is a supernatural work of God. Building a church is something supernatural. And
for sure.
And yeah, and so my wife, your mother, we served in a church. I got saved, and then mom eventually got saved, and
maybe last year. No,
right.
I'm sorry.
And so no, but but it was a call upon my life, and mom, your mother, my wife, she's, she fell in love with God. She fell in love with God, and we were just servants in the church, and we served people, and, she knew that this was a call upon my life, and, and it was something she know God was calling her to as well. And, she followed me, and this is what we wanted to do. And I couldn't have done it without your mom. I couldn't have done it without my wife. It was impossible. How Adam needed Eve, to help me. I there's so many times that my wife saved my bacon. There were times where it was time to. There were days where I would,
save my bacon,
my bacon, and so where I there are difficult times out there, and I remember one time particularly where I didn't want to get out of bed. I was like, man, I'm tired, I'm sleepy. She's like, we got called. We came all the way out here. We're gonna build something for God. You gonna get out of bed, go to prayer. I was like, yes, I needed that swift kick in the butt. But I thank God for that. I thank God. Yeah. So, we've been doing this together. So definitely, she's a blessing to me.
Kind of going off that, I guess my question is like, let's say you're single or whatever, but you're like, oh, I'm prepared. I really am. I'm ready to be a pastor. Like, what are the real reasons that we want to send couples? Is there more to it than just like obviously there are probably some qualities there that come along with being a spouse. There's obviously an inherent helper that's going to be there with you, to, do that ministry with you. You're not alone.
Right.
But are there any things that maybe people wouldn't think about? That's like, obviously, we send couples because of da 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 da.
Well, yeah. So when our fellowship first started, they had actually sent out, or they had tried, from what I was told, they tried to have men go out and preach by themselves that weren't married yet. Here's these zealous men, desiring to preach the gospel. The problem with that is that, every woman that came into the church is like, maybe that's my wife, or maybe that person's my wife. And so there's a conflict of interest there,
Yeah, for sure. A serious conflict.
Serious conflict of interest.
Can you imagine? Oh no, no. Can I make that joke?
I
I'm
don't
gonna
know.
make it.
Go ahead.
Imagine someone comes into counseling and they're struggling in a relationship, and you're like, you should just break up. They be.
Oh my goodness. Anyway, yeah. So
I'm saying maybe that's why you gotta be all right, bro.
yeah. Well,
That's why. Hey,
so the conflict of interest, and
right.
so
There's definitely a yeah.
yeah.
There could definitely be conflicts there.
So again, go. So
yeah.
go ahead. Go ahead. Go ahead.
Okay, so you mentioned before, like obviously, you get sent out with your wife or your husband, to go start a work, to pioneer, as you explained. You're called to do that, right?
Mm-hmm.
But let's say you're called to do it, right? You go out, but the things that maybe you were looking for to come out of that ministry aren't there or don't come about. Like you're not seeing people get saved, or I don't know, you're feeling like you can't be a pastor or something, like you're the stress is getting to you, or something like that. You know what I mean? If people are called, to be pastors, to lead ministries and whatnot, why is it that sometimes it doesn't work out? Why do they fail?
And there's several reasons that why it happens. Sometimes it could be that they weren't prepared, and so sometimes people are called. God calls them. God has put it in their hearts, and like many are called, a few are chosen. The scripture is given, right? And so God does call, but sometimes they disqualify themselves. Sometimes there are people that they just aren't. They're not ready yet. Which is why we have the discipleship program. What we discipleship in our churches, we do discipleships, just the training up of couples to go out and minister. And sometimes they're just not ready yet. Sometimes their marriages aren't where they should be, and they don't have a prayer life. They're not praying. Again, like I said, building a church is spiritual. And there'll be people that they go out leaning upon talent and ability.
Ooh, yeah.
They're charismatic. They may be really good with people, and and that just is just the flesh. And so pride begins to get in the way of where God is supposed to be moving. And so there's that issue, or sometimes people go out believing, hey, when I get out there, when I get out to the city, everybody's gonna be getting saved.
Yeah, exactly. I'm about to save the whole city by myself.
Exactly.
Because I got it like that. You know what
Right.
I mean? They're not putting the trust in God. Yeah.
Right, and they're quickly humbled. Hopefully they get humble. That hey, this is spiritual.
Yeah.
And so, and the truth is, sometimes even those charismatic people will build something, will start to be built, but the foundation is weak, because it's built on maybe some talents, or sometimes, like you were talking about earlier, about everybody wanting to be a pastor. There is that people are starstruck, like, oh wow, it's Friday night, there are all those couples standing on the platform, and they're calling out their names, and they're laying hands on them, and so people are like, man, one day that's going to be me. I want to be on the platform. And
Okay, hold on. Sorry, not to cut you off, but I'm just providing some clarification for everybody. When he's talking about Friday night, in our fellowship we have a Bible conference, which is an event that takes place annually where we have sermons and and events, videos of the things that are going on around the world, because we are worldwide. I know, flexing, but it's just what it is, because we're doing it for God. So it's usually like it's about a week of just sermons and whatnot, and on Friday is the time when or I think it's Thursday and Friday, but
Yeah.
Thursday is international.
Right, Thursday International works. And
Right. So Thursday and Friday, they'll call out people's names, couples, and say so and so is going here, and they're in front of probably thousands of people, and they're on the stage. They have the lights pointed at them, and what I'm gonna call him Dad. What Dad is saying here is that in this instance, maybe some people don't really see past that. You know what I mean? Like being called to be a pastor and getting sent out is that's okay, cool, but that's the start of the actual position. The actual labor that you have to take
Right.
care of, carry
Right.
out, and they just stop there. Like, oh, I can't wait to have my name called out by my pastor, and it's like, okay, good job. Now, are you going to be able to pastor? You know what I
Right,
mean?
exactly. And so that's very, very real, because that happens more often than it should. People are excited, and it's really rooted in pride, or sometimes it's like, man, I really want to do that. Maybe they have good intentions, but like you said, it's beyond that. It's
Right.
That Friday night, that excitement, the cameras on you, everybody's looking at you, they're cheering for you, your church is cheering for you. That moment ends right there.
Yeah,
you got to get down
exactly.
from that platform, and you're going to have to pack up your things and head to a city and labor to build a church. And so,
Right.
again, a lot of times people do fail because they don't realize that it's a work. It's a labor that
Yeah.
is involved, you know. And so sometimes people aren't prepared for that. It's an emotional thing for them, and they
Yeah. And yeah, they're looking for something other than, what being a pastor is about. They're looking for some kind of recognition or some kind of, limelight, something like that.
right,
And then when they actually get out there, they realize that, being a pastor isn't glamorous at all.
exactly,
Being a pastor is hard work.
right. And so, yeah, a lot of times they see the pastor, and they're looking, oh, I can't wait to get behind the pulpit, I'm gonna preach these great sermons, people are gonna be swayed and moved by my words. But I tell guys all the time, I said, you know what, preaching is a very small part of pastoring.
Yeah.
You're up there maybe a total of 3 hours a week max as far as a sermon, but then you got to get down from that platform and really start pastoring. You got to
Yeah.
deal with people's lives. I mean, there's all kinds of dynamics
Dynamics.
of pastoring, of pastoring.
Yeah.
And so again, you going back to what you're talking about, failures.
Yeah, because I'm thinking some people, they actually are prepared, and they work hard, and they have God helping them, working with them, and whatnot, and they're past the limelight. You know what I mean? They know what they're really called to do. They're really ready to preach, to lead, to help people. But sometimes, well, I guess I don't know for sure, so I'll ask you as the pastor. Do you feel as though maybe like where you are sent can affect how effective maybe you are, or like your
Yes,
location or something like that?
definitely. Location matters. God is everywhere, no doubt. He's omnipresent, but there are some places that are more difficult than others, and that is just a fact. Different cities, different places, demographics sometimes even is a factor sometimes. Really,
Yeah.
the couple that you send there, and these are things that,
Don't fit in.
yeah, they don't fit in, and it's,
Yeah.
race is a factor sometimes, and that's just a real
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah. That's the
Um,
world.
You know, that's just the world that we live in, and it's like and so, and sometimes where there's a supernatural element, of course, we need that, and sometimes there'll be a totally different race, and then miracles happen, and normally sometimes we could see that overseas, but you know, sometimes even in our own nation, I've seen that become a problem.
Yeah.
But so all those different things, because I mean, people are people,
Yeah.
And
Definitely.
the gospel works anywhere and everywhere for sure.
Yeah.
But there's some places that are more receptive. I mean, even Jesus sent his disciples out. He said, "Hey, if they don't receive you, shake the dust off your feet and keep moving." Because that's just a reality of the ministry that it's not going to be accepted everywhere. So that's not all. So failure in that sense is not always the fault of the pastor, so to speak.
Right.
You know,
It's not, it's just where you're at, and it's just, circumstantial or
mm-hmm.
Not that, God doesn't work with everybody, but maybe, there could be an instance where, God really has someone else in mind for that area that he knows that, I mean, I'm not God, so I don't know his plans
Mm-hmm.
or whatever, but, he has somebody that maybe wasn't ready when you got sent out, so you had to start the work or something.
Right.
And then God was really preparing someone else to take over for you and really, get it flourish and get it popping. You know what I'm saying?
And that's critical.
Or some,
even what you just said is, because sometimes, the couple going out there, they may not see a whole lot of success, but man, they've been there praying, they've been outreaching, they've been knocking on doors, they've been contending, and so they've established something. There are seeds that are there, that they may not really see the fruit from it, because sometimes you'll sow seeds and you don't see the fruit right away. But they've labored, they've tilled the ground, they fought the demons that are there, and like you said, they prepared the ground for maybe another couple that will go in there later on.
Definitely. Kind of going off of that and what you were saying before with being humbled and humility and all that. Sometimes I feel like, God will let you go out there and not do well, maybe so that you can, I don't know, see someone else rise up and do well, and maybe it's someone you worked with, someone that you really wanted to get saved, knew they were going to be a pastor or something, to see them take over your work and do something great with it. God's teaching you something that, there's value in working with people. There's value in building relationships with those and seeing them live for God and really wanting to invest yourself into their lives so that they get saved and all that.
Yes.
And then there's also the other learning experience, maybe for those that were worried about limelight and worried about recognition, where God's like, hey, bro, you need me. And you need to know that.
Oh, yeah.
You figured it out. Now maybe you can go back out. Now that you've experienced maybe something that you didn't want to experience. But, now I feel like now that you've experienced this, God's saying, okay, now you're ready. You weren't ready before, but I've made you ready now, or something like that. I don't know what your opinion on that might be, but let me know.
But definitely, it's critical that we learn from failure, from those times of difficulty. And so sometimes, God allows us to fail, like you said, that we could, seek him, learn to seek him, learn to humble ourselves.
Yeah.
And, but yeah,
not focus on our own abilities, our own charisma, as you were saying, maybe being, I'm a great public speaker, and not really worrying about that as much.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, sometimes you'd be surprised. Some couples go out there and they learn, hey, we really need to work on our marriages, and they're working on their marriages, and they're, begin to learn
and building stuff up.
Right.
Kind of going off of that, with with the whole like being a good public speaker and being good with people and being charismatic and all that. A lot of times that's great and all, but that's not what's important when you're being a pastor. If you want to see things happen, you know what I mean. What's the most important is obviously believing in God, doing what He's called you to do, but overall just having faith, being faithful to what you're doing. You know what I'm saying? Really believing that God's gonna come through, and even if He doesn't come through in the way that you wanted Him to, that God knows what He's doing, right? And I feel like another way that people can fail is that even if they have all the charisma and they have all the cool stuff, they don't have the faithfulness. They're not really committed, I guess, is what I'm thinking. But I don't know.
That's true. It's true because, again, if you lean upon talent and ability, then you fail to see the purpose behind why you're out there, or the fact that you do have to work, because some people will lean on that and they won't labor. They won't continue to outreach. I mean, you got to go out there and sow seeds. You have to outreach. You have to evangelize. You have to be, more than anything, a person who stays in prayer. You have to be disciplined. It's a disciplined life. It's not like, sometimes people, they're especially you're launched out of maybe a good sized church where there's people involved in ministry, there's impact, there's a lot of people outreaching, there's a lot of people praying, there's a lot of people giving, et cetera, et cetera. You go out there to pastor, especially pioneering, it's just you and your wife. I mean, I remember, going out there as soon as I got home from work, my wife would make me a meal, and then it's like, all right, babe, see you later. I'm going on outreach. We're out. I'm going rain or shine. You got flyers with you all the time. You're in the grocery store. You're witnessing anything that moves. Just believing God for that, and of course prayer. Prayer is so essential. I stress that a lot, even in my own church. And your prayer life is so important, and it's because we need God. We really need God, and so a lot of times people fail. There are people that fail out there because they're leaning upon how good their flyers look, how slick their music is, and all that, and
right,
all that stuff. I got good equipment. Look how fancy my building is. If God's not involved in this, then it's empty.
Yeah, exactly. They're not focusing on the spiritual aspect.
Right.
Or they're not that they're not focusing on it. They're just kind of choosing to put it to the side. You know what I mean? Like they'll be like, yeah, God will do a work here after I've done all this. Then it'll be ready for God to come in and do something awesome. I don't know. We were kind of talking about that in episode 3, with getting saved in general, where people feel like they got to get ready to get saved, or like get everything prepared before God gets involved. When that's a bad mindset to have, where you need God to be involved from start to finish. You know what I mean? Where getting ready involves God. You know what I mean? You don't get ready and then it's like, all right, time to,
right?
Like, I don't know. Maybe people are like, I gotta wait till I've convinced some people to come into my church before I can start up any. I don't know, before I can start preaching, or before I can starting to write sermons or reading my word to study, and maybe more than I used to. It's like, do all the things that you would do if you had a big church now. You know what I mean? All the disciplines, all the, you know what I'm saying? So that, like you're like, God knows is like, you're ready. You know what I mean? You are doing, I know you can handle it. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
Not like that you got to prove yourself to God or anything, but it's like, why limit yourself because you feel as though you're not prepared to you know what I'm saying?
Right. And because and it's a labor of love. And so there are times where like we're talking about failure, like sometimes things won't succeed, but because you're depending on God and so on and so forth, I mean, it really helps, your heart, a lot of times. to deal with the failure properly. There's so many, different reasons. Again, speaking of the issue of failures, again, marriage trouble.
Yeah, that, I don't know. Like, okay, let's say you have a good marriage, right? Already, right? Like your marriage is good and whatnot. But then before you said that it's a labor of love. So I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry for this segue, but I can't get it out of my head, so I'm gonna say it.
Mm-hmm.
So speaking of love, because you love me, and speaking of labor, because that's how babies are birthed into the world.
Okay.
You had me obviously in 2002 because
Mm-hmm.
that's when I was born, and you've been pastoring since '05, right? So I was 3 years old.
Mm-hmm.
What was it like? Like, do you think that maybe people's kids like can affect their ministry? Maybe not even they're young, maybe they're older or whatever. But like, do you think someone's children play a role? I mean,
Yes.
obviously they do, but what role do they play?
Right. And so a major role. And so that's another thing that a lot of people don't know. There are times where a couple could be great and
Yeah.
they won't get sent out because their kids are bad.
Mm.
I've seen there's been times where their kids are just out of control. I said, there's no way you're going to be able to build a church and your kids, scripture says, how you going to, build the house of God. You can't control your own household, and
Yeah.
so that does become an issue. And so first, pastoring is, there is stress involved. Okay. You
Yeah.
are, I tell people all the time, when you work a regular job, you go to work, you may be at your computer, at your desk, and people might you might hear some complaints about people, or people might say a few things to you, but you know what? You just finish your job and you go home.
Yeah.
Pastoring, I mean, you are really dealing with a lot of people's issues, and you see people project a certain way at a regular job, but at church, dealing with people, you see the true colors of people, you see the other side of people. And so that could be stressful. And so that's already a strain there. And so then on top of that, I mean, of your kids, I mean, I've heard stories of people pastoring and they've had to come back because their kids are fornicating.
Oh, nah.
Yeah, and so the kids are
Really?
fornicating. They're you got the daughter messing around with the guys in the church, or you have those kind of issues. The kids are just rebellious. So there's all kind of difficulties, and so that's a huge distraction. If the kids are bad at school, they're getting in fights, they're getting in trouble, and so that causes a real strain on the parents trying to pastor.
Yeah.
And
Because then, yeah, you can't even really focus on your ministry because you got to, you got to put so much energy towards your children. I mean, obviously, you're going to put a lot of energy towards your children regardless.
mm-hmm.
Well, we'll talk about that later, but I would hope you do. Like I remember during my junior year of high school and maybe sophomore year in the apartment in Yorktown, I
Oh
know for
Lord.
sure that I was stressful to be around.
Yes.
There were a lot of moments during that time that you weren't pastoring then, you were assisting, but they probably would have really sucked if you were taking care of a whole church and also dealing with your rebellious son back at home. And I can Elijah, don't agree. What do you anyway? And I can
I'm
I
not
can
even here.
definitely okay, bro. I could definitely, see how that could be a problem for sure. But while you were pastoring, you never had that problem ever because we were always good then, I think. Maybe.
I mean,
I don't know. Do you? No, don't tell that story.
Wait, no, I'm not. I don't even know what story you're talking about. But
Oh, thank goodness.
I am. I mean, there's several little stories I could tell, but I'm not gonna embarrass. I'm not gonna embarrass anyone. But honestly,
I mean, it's the podcast. It's chill on the podcast.
nah,
But go ahead and continue what you were saying.
But no, I thank God. I really, really do. You guys have been great. You and your brothers have been a blessing, and that I think that is a huge part of why we've been able to even move forward in a lot of the things that God has allowed us to do, because I haven't had to deal with the son trying to be a gangster, or the son on drugs. Or
No, you did for a second.
I mean, yeah, you were crazy for a little bit, but it wasn't.
I meant when I came back. Okay, sorry.
Yeah, but it wasn't like you were. It wasn't those kind of. I go to work, I hear different issues that other people were having with their teenagers, and I'm like, man, thank God, I haven't, I haven't had to deal with those kind of real issues.
Yeah, for
you
real.
just had a hard head for a little.
Yeah, but like you never had to like. I don't know. Like I've heard stories of. I mean, sometimes y'all. I feel like I've heard stories of you guys and your parents, where parents have to call the police on their own kids and stuff like that. Cause it's like, if you don't get out of my face, I'm calling the cops.
Yeah.
There's just these kinds of situations where it's like, man.
Right. So
yeah,
you guys, thank God there was never an issue where your behaviors or whatever caused an issue. In our ministry, or anything like that.
Also, this isn't in our notes, but I want to say it. And I might be biased, but it's whatever. Sometimes your kids can actually be a blessing to your ministry. You can be like, oh, I'm so glad I have my sons or my daughters, because, man, we wouldn't be able to do this. Like, I've been to so many churches where you look in the back, who's running the slides? Oh, it's pastor's daughter or pastor's son. Or who's, especially in small churches, who's doing offering, who's doing everything. It's the family.
Exactly.
So even in that, it's,
that's huge.
It's a group effort. Yeah.
That's huge. Because what people don't realize too, and that's a powerful thing that you just said, because, on, like, again, we go back to those Friday nights when the husband and wife are on the platform. It's like they're not the only ones getting launched out. You're launching out their kids as well. Yeah. Their kids are going with you, and yeah, the if your kids are saved, and if they have they're at that age, man. I mean, I don't remember how old you were, but you were playing the drums when we were pioneering.
Like 4.
No.
No. Okay, I wasn't 4. I would have been 5 or 6.
Yeah, and I remember you playing the drums, and you were pretty good, for your age and size. But even now, even to now, you guys being involved, and
we're doing this right now.
Yes, so it's huge. Again, a real blessing. I mean, even you guys went with us to Guyana, and those are real formative years of your lives.
Mm-hmm.
Your coming of age time when we were in Guyana, and so it's a real blessing, to have kids to help your ministry and not hinder it, because I've seen it happen way too many times where the kids become this worry in the back of a pastor's mind. You're here trying to deal with other people's children and families, and and then at the same time you have to deal with your rebellious child, et cetera, et cetera. And it does, I've seen even where pastors have had to put their kids out the church.
Yeah, I've seen that. Yeah, which is rough.
It's rough. It's very rough.
Yeah.
So,
but while that would suck to have a bad relationship, to have a child that's not really invested in your ministry sometimes, or not even like a decent person. You know what I mean? They're dealing with so many things. They're becoming a stress in your life.
Mm-hmm.
But this last reason that I want to talk about, that I've saved for last for a reason, is the one that I've seen. Well, not that I've seen the most, but that is the most shocking sometimes, and it's the most sad in a lot of cases, where it's like, man, that's so difficult to deal with, when pastoring. I know I've built up the anticipation for you guys.
I'm like, spit it out.
The big thing is troubles with the person that was sent out with you, your helper, your partner, your spouse. When you have issues in that relationship, when your marriage is not going well as a pastor or a pastor's wife, it's like, from the jump, when we were going to be pastoring, it's a team effort, and my teammate is fumbling, dropping the ball, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And to me, that's so difficult, man. Yes. I'm going to ask for your expertise on this subject, not on bad marriages. That's not your expertise. Your expertise as being a pastor, and how that might have affected your ministry, and how it's affected your peers' ministries.
Ooh, that's a difficult one, because you see those couples when they get launched out. I mean, the smiles in their faces. Normally, there's an excitement that's there. They're going to go out and do something, for God. But again, sometimes the stresses of ministry. Sometimes, there's some fighting that tends to happen. There's a lot of stress. Sometimes it's stress financially, because sometimes they have to move, find different jobs, and again, stress of kids. And sadly, I mean, there are times, where they're out there laboring and they don't keep their hearts right. Maybe the difficulty of pastoring, or maybe there are issues in their hearts before that they never dealt with, and those things are exposed. Like, you're out there in that refiner's fire, and things start coming to the surface, and there's been adultery, and here are these ministers of the gospel, and we're wanting to see people give their lives to Christ, and those same people, tragically, fall into sin.
Yeah.
And it happens it happens too often, to be honest.
Yeah. It does.
I've, even in my own time within the church, pastors or pastors' wives that have gone outside their marriages, and again, I just knowing, even friends, those kind of things have taken place, and it's a crushing blow. And you think the ripple effect of that, in the home, the kids, and then it hits the people that sent you out. And it continues to trickle down, and it just makes some serious waves. And so that is, I wish it was something we wouldn't have to deal with, but it's, I've seen it happen since I've gotten saved, and it's something that has continued to happen in different times, in different seasons, and even very recently, in people's lives. And so it is a tragedy.
Yeah, it is. Where even, me, who I haven't even been alive that long, you know what I mean? Not alive that long, but like, I've, in my years of life, have experienced this as well. Have experienced the ripples. I've had pastors of mine own, that dealt with these kinds of things, or knew someone that dealt with them very personally, closely. And I guess that's why I feel like it's the saddest thing. It's just it affects so many people,
Oh, man.
And And you say that it sucks that it happens so often, but I feel as though that it kind of, not that it's, well, it kind of makes sense that this would be the one that comes up maybe the most often. Not because it's something that, happens the most often, but this is the thing that, like, it happens. And if there's marriage trouble, you know what I mean, of any capacity, this, that's your church right there, or that's your ministry. That's the, like, you got sent out as a team, and if that team's not working together, then the ministry's not working. So I feel like these other things that we were talking about, like maybe the location you're at, or maybe you're just not faithful enough, or you just weren't ready. These are things that you can work on. I mean, well, marriage is something you can work on too, but I'm saying these are things that you can work all the way through, you know what I mean, and stay pastoring the whole time, But marriage is one of those things where it's like sometimes the best thing to do would probably be, instead of trying to put all this extra stress on ourselves of, dealing with other people while we're dealing with marriage issues, sometimes it's like either it's going to blow up into something big, or we're going to have to really take a look at our marriage while we're pastoring. And sometimes that's difficult. So then it's like, okay, well, we got to come home. We got to go back to church. Yeah. We got to,
And that's a very, very important part. And again, it's the areas of ministry. Okay, so prayer, having a prayer life, etc. Your heart right, but like you're saying, your marriage is so important. And so what happens also, that you could be so focused on ministry and loving people that you fail to love the person right next to you. And we got to build a church, and people are like, we got to outreach, we got to do this, I got to labor, I got to get the flyers, I got to this and that. And then people, forget.
Start to, yeah.
What really woke me up to that, your mom is super faithful. She's, she's always been incredibly faithful. And I remember just even before being a pastor, I remember I'm the door director in the church, and I'm running. I'm outreaches, concerts, everything. And in my mind, I'm thinking, man, I'm a really good husband. I'm being a good husband, et cetera, because my wife is right there. She's with me. We're, doing things together, et cetera.
Right.
But, it was a weird moment where she was like, "You don't love me." I'm like, "What do you mean?" I said, no, you don't love me. And like, yeah, of course I love you. And it was almost like that moment where Peter and Jesus, like, "Peter, do you love me?" "Yeah, I love you." And it was almost a very similar moment. And she says, "I've been right there because I'm following you." And I've been laboring with you, but we, the time that we spend, like, it wasn't there. I wasn't giving attention to my first ministry, which is my marriage. And our marriage was good. We weren't fighting or anything like that, but it's true, and it's so important. And a lot of guys miss that. They're so focused on the ministry that they give no attention to the ministry in their homes, and that ends up blowing up later on. Where there is adultery, there's sometimes, well, you're not showing me love here. I'm gonna find love somewhere else. And so it's just a real open door for the enemy to try to come in. And so that's important. Love your wife, love your spouse. Give that attention,
Really.
Yes.
Yeah. I kind of want to say this also. Like, I know we've been talking about, being called to preach and being sent out and all that, but that advice that you just heard, that applies everywhere. That applies to any ministry you want to be a part of. It applies to not just pastoring. You cannot
Facts.
ignore your spouse. You cannot, like, I've even, in my own experience with people where I've heard people say things like, how could you be mad that I'm doing, let me just say something random like drama, right? You're doing plays for the church, or you're doing skits or whatever, and you have play practice or drama practice like Monday, Wednesday, Friday, or somehow. I don't know how you're managing this, but you are. And you're there and you're like, I'm doing this for the Lord, so why are you so upset that I'm here all the time? And I've heard people make that argument where they feel justified in what they're doing because it is spiritual, but it's like, you, like my dad said, your first ministry is your marriage, and if you're not taking care of that, I mean, this is a little harsh. I'm sorry, but this is the podcast. This is not anything. Look, bro, you are failing. You're failing. Look, bro, if you are not, and not just bro, sis as well, if you are not focusing on your husband or your wife, and instead using reasons and excuses as to why you're not giving them your full attention as a spouse, it's like you're setting yourself up for failure. You're setting yourself up for, I don't know. I said it the first time. Failure.
And
Marriage failure and marriage troubles and that.
Yeah.
But go ahead.
No, I'm saying that's important. That
Yeah.
if you're married, even Paul said, those of you that are married, you have to give attention to your spouse. You have to.
Yes.
That there's ministry there, but you know what? You just need to know that that ministry is critical. Because it will affect you down the line. It really, and people will tell. People could tell if things are going wrong, if things aren't going right, and again, there's a spirit involved in all that. So, but that's important, definitely. I've seen ministries fail because of that. Lack of loving your spouse, and just loving the ministry more than your own spouse, and so. No, that's important. And so even that too, like you had mentioned that, you guys or the kids, or sometimes the kids, they feel left out.
Yeah. I've definitely heard that as well.
Kids sometimes you're dragging them along and everywhere, and so it's important. But obviously we have to give attention to the ministry. There are sacrifices involved. But you have to make sure that you allot time, and it takes discipline. It really takes discipline.
Yeah, and discipline is, even in marriage, it takes discipline. But kind of going back to what we were talking about before, that pastoring takes discipline, and then there's a lot of factors that go into it, a lot of hard work that has to take place. But also, I guess what we're saying is that in a lot of the cases that we were bringing up, it's not always the end of the world that you've failed in your ministry or failed in that moment. You know what I mean? Sometimes, it's a little, it's more than just, the church didn't flourish as much as you wanted to. Like we were saying with the marriage troubles and infidelity, things like that, that's a little more, now you need to work on your salvation first. And then you can start thinking about, being a pastor later, Right. But sometimes people, even just simply as, trying to be a pastor and do the things that they feel like they've been called to do and not succeeding and failing, sometimes that's hard. And of course it's hard. You know what I mean? I remember it wasn't even a failure or anything, but like when my dad had to leave his pioneer work in Virginia Beach, it was not easy at all because they built that work up and they had to, I don't know, I'm sure they didn't think they were abandoning it, but they did have to leave to go back and be redirected and stuff like that. But, it's hard. It's not easy at all to, either not see success or have to leave your church. But I guess something I want to point out here is that what won't fix it or solve it is complaining about it, I guess. Like, that sounds, I don't know. I don't care how it sounds. You shouldn't, like, these things happen, and it's okay for them to happen. It's okay if, you didn't get the results you wanted, because God's still on the throne. You know what I'm saying? So It's not like, well, there goes my one shot at being a pastor. It's over. You know what I mean? Like, there's turbulence, there's trials, there are things that go on, but that doesn't mean you quit. But sometimes, I don't know, I feel like people will burn this image or this idea into their head of, not I failed in this instance, but I am a failure.
Right.
And it's like, no, bro, that's not the case. That is not the case.
Right.
It didn't go well this one time. That doesn't mean give up. Go ahead, Dad.
No, very true. Very true. And you mentioned even us being redirected in Virginia, when we were in Virginia Beach. We were building a church. It wasn't, massive by any stretch of the imagination. Really just a handful of people. We get in the 20s. And still we had a small core there. But I knew it just wasn't getting to where I would have liked it to see. And I remember I know just God put it on my heart, that I need to go back for redirection. And that's what, and sometimes people look at that as a bad thing. They look at, oh, you failed. I remember even when I was announced, first of all, it really hurt my wife, because she was like, oh, she was crying. She was weeping. Oh, no, our church. We're leaving our church.
I didn't say that on purpose. I didn't want people to know that mom could cry.
Yeah, so, yeah. And so we left there. And I remember, I said, no, we're going to be redirected, that conference. And I remember when they announced it, going back in for redirection, Ed and Deani, I remember it was weird. I got a text message. I don't know who it was from, and the question was, what did you do? That's what the text, yeah, somebody was like, what did you do? Like, so they think that because you're redirected, you did something wrong. I still don't know who that person was, but sometimes
hater,
right? So
Satan,
and
sorry.
Exactly, no, because then the devil does do that to people. You sucked, you failed, you didn't do, you weren't really called, and so all those lies are there in people's minds. But it's like God still has a plan for your life, and like, redirection is exactly what that is. God is redirecting you to, somewhere else, another city, another place, another place spiritually. And so it's so important to look at it that way, that your life hasn't ceased to have value. God's calling for you that hasn't, become invalid. And so, praise God, we continued on, and we've been able to do what we did because, we held on to that perspective. But the truth is, some people don't. Some people allow the failure to get to them, and they get stuck there, and that's part of the enemy's plan. But God has a purpose, for us, purpose and destiny, and so definitely can't get stuck in that wilderness place of complaining.
Yeah. I feel as though people will experience failure, in particular in like a ministry sense, in pastoring and whatnot. And they're going through, obviously, some emotions and whatnot, dealing with, I'm going to use the word, mind battles, stuff like that. But I think where a lot of people will mess up is that they will, one, not talk to God, not pray about it, you know, and not seek God's help. Which, I mean, if you're not seeking God's help, then of course you're not gonna, it's like, come on, bro, it's God. You want His help,
Right?
And then, two, it's not talking to the person that God has appointed to lead you and shepherd you, I guess, and to care for you and all that, and that would be your pastor. And I feel like, I don't know, you can definitely get into a rut and then like not tell anybody, not talk about it. And I mean, this is just like
Go
right
ahead.
now. This is a pastor getting a call. You know what I mean? So then it's like you can start to let these emotions take over your brain and not share them or not seek counsel, not try to seek help from anybody else. But in doing that, you're kind of hurting yourself because you're trying to hide, um, you know, things that you're actually dealing with and whatnot. And I feel like that's not healthy. Like God gave you a pastor for a reason, and you should go to him, you know, if you want to ask him some questions or if you want to, I don't know, you need someone that you can trust and talk to and all that. Your pastor is there.
Mm-hmm.
And this would be called counseling in a lot of situations where, you know, you got to seek counsel from your pastor.
Yes.
And this, as my dad was saying a little bit earlier, is like you may preach 3 hours a week, is what he said. But being counseling, talking to people, helping people through all kinds of issues, that's what the bulk of being a pastor really is. And I feel like people, maybe they miss that, you know what I mean? Or they don't have
Mm-hmm.
that understanding. So then it's a shock when they go out there and people are depending on them and asking them questions, difficult questions, and calling them at 3:31 in the morning and things and
Right.
things like that, where it's like, man,
Oh yeah.
I
And
didn't know that this was a part of the job.
yes. And so that's the side of things that people don't see. Again, people like the glamorous side. It's almost like people talk about people wanting to be Navy SEALs, and they see the posters, they see the guys with the rifles, and they see the cool uniforms, and and they're like, I'm gonna do that, and they think that it's just gonna be like sign up and here's the cool gear, here's the title of Navy SEAL. It's like, nah, there's a lot involved in before you even get
Yeah.
to that. There's a lot more involved behind the scenes. There are days that suck, and
Yeah.
the SEALs will tell you that. And so, pastoring again, the it's not the glamorous, it's not the lights and the platform and the preaching and the illustrations and all that maybe can move people's hearts. Like you really start pastoring, preaching is not pastoring. When you get down from that platform, it's like you're pastor now.
Yeah.
It's like you are a shepherd. You have to deal with sheep. Sheep have mess, you know, and people need to be led. They need to be fed. They need to be directed. And sheep go astray. There's wolves that try to come into the flock. There are different, and as a shepherd, and a good shepherd would stands at the gate. The good shepherd does that, and so yeah, counseling is a major part. And so, uh, one something that I pray often and always is, God, give me wisdom. God, help me. I'm telling you, there's so many times where I mean, truth is stranger than fiction. The kind of stories and the kind of things and issues that people bring up to you, be like, what? You did what? I'm like, sometimes, I have to conceal the shock of some of the things that I hear.
Wow. Yeah.
Yes, and but I could be in my office or wherever, and I'm counseling, and I'm praying. I'm silently praying, God, give me the words to speak to help these people, or help this
Yeah.
person. Just directing people's lives, and it could be they're you want people to pray, but people want to talk. You tell people, hey, go pray. Have you prayed about it? Go pray. Talk to Jesus. But they want to hear it from you. They want to come to pastor, and
Yeah.
so it's marriages, it's all kind of different you know issues in life, and that you have to counsel, and really sometimes even talking people off ledges,
Yeah.
literally.
Yeah. Sometimes.
you know uh, and
Yeah.
it's people forget that, again, like, we wrestle not against flesh and blood. That, and I really have really learned to, just to see that the supernatural, that spiritual realm, dealing with that. That people have demons. Really, like, there's
Yeah.
like, for real, like, just, there are some issues that is more than what meets the eye. People got, there's real demonic influences that you are dealing with, and you have to confront as a pastor, and you better be saved, and you better be right with God, and you better be someone who prays, because you need God's help. There's no
Yeah.
talent or ability, no preaching ability that's gonna, you know, uh, you know, set some people free. And it's
Right.
like, you need the mind of God to, some, to deal with a lot of things, like that.
Yeah. Yeah. I did want to bring that up mainly because I don't know. I've dealt with that personally. Not personally, but like I don't know. People may have heard me say in my life that the reason that I feel as though I probably wouldn't be a great pastor, or not a great pastor, but just one of the reasons that I don't want to be a pastor is that um, dealing with people is definitely something that I'm not super great at. Mainly because I feel as though a lot of times, and I don't know, humans as a species, we're selfish,
Yes.
and sometimes my response to issues is, hey, okay, me too, bro. I got issues too. Now go figure it out like I'm figuring it out, or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And so, and I feel like, I don't know. I feel like it's not really advertised. Is that the right word? But like put out as much that this is a part of the job, you know?
Right.
Like, um, you know, I know that because obviously you're my dad and you're a pastor. And Elijah knows that, and he still wants to be a pastor. So I'm not saying that, you know, reasons to not preach, reasons to not be sent, you know what I'm saying? But I'm just saying that you got to understand that more to just, being able to write a sermon, you have to have what my dad calls a heart for people,
Yes.
which is where you can really invest yourself into your congregation, invest yourself into the people that God has placed in your church so that you can talk to them and give them the advice that they need and all that. And I don't know, I feel as though it's important because I don't know how people would know that. I guess you see it in your own pastor,
Mm-hmm.
but like you said, with this whole limelight thing and really wanting to be a pastor and all that, people don't really know that there's this other side to it. I
Right.
feel as though.
Which kind of leads us kind of back to the whole calling thing and people getting sent out. And so, as a pastor, I look for that in people. That, okay, you can speak well, you're charismatic, but do you work with people?
Yeah.
Do you help people? Are you building relationships with people? Do you care about people? Are you feeding people? Are you picking people up, et cetera, et cetera? Because
Mm-hmm.
that's really a huge part of your mission. I don't care how good you can preach.
Yeah.
That means nothing. You know,
Yeah. In the
it could be
grand
a
scheme
fact.
of things.
In the grand scheme of things, it means very little.
Yeah.
Because not everybody can preach.
Yeah.
And there are some people
But
who
it's
aren't great preachers, but they are good with people, and they have good sized churches, not because of their preaching ability, but because, one, they trust God, and
mm-hmm.
secondly, they love people. And
Right.
so, and you're gonna have to, you have to deal with all kinds of people. You know,
Yeah.
everybody's not going to come in that is going to be favorable. There are going to be people who come in all different types of backgrounds, and they're all not going to
Yeah.
look, you know, et cetera, et cetera, like you would the ideal picture perfect Christian. And
Yeah.
so
Exactly.
you have to deal with all kinds of personalities and backgrounds. People come in with baggage. The church is like as a hospital.
Yeah.
And so people come in broken, hurt. A lot of times, people come into the church. They're not looking just to just come there and hear sermons. They're coming because there's sometimes there are things going on in their lives, You know, they're there because they have heart issues and marriage issues and etc. And you have to be ready to help those people, right? You lead them to Christ. You make sure that you're not like, hey, I'm the pastor, I'm the answer to your problems. The goal is to lead them to Christ, but you have to be able to
Yeah.
lead them in that direction.
Right. I guess a question kind of going in that is like to kind of come back from our last topic and go more into counseling as a concept as a
Mm-hmm.
whole.
Mm-hmm.
What I wonder is, as a pastor, obviously, these things, these facets of your ministry, being helping people and having a heart for people, I'm 100% convinced that it can't be easy every time you do it. Maybe rarely is it easy ever,
Mm-hmm.
right? But I don't know that. So I guess I'm asking you, are there ever times when counseling is something that you just don't want to do, or it's like, what are your, I guess, your opinion on counseling? Like, is it like, obviously you have to do it, and that's,
Yes, it's
well, I mean, I'm
unavoidable.
biased, right?
So one
And that's
thing,
why. And
yeah,
go ahead.
it's
Go ahead.
unavoidable. So definitely expect to have to do it, right? If you're gonna
Right.
have people, you know, you have to do it. There are no ox in the crib is clean, but if there's people there, there are things you're gonna have to deal with, and so and there's all kind of different, and it depends. Sometimes it's counseling. There's an issue of correction where you're correcting something, you're dealing with an issue, and you know those aren't always pleasant, but they're necessary. And so, in my mind, you know, again, I love being a pastor.
Mm-hmm.
I do love people, and sometimes, to be honest, there are times where I'm glad for the opportunity to be able
Right.
to counsel. But yeah, there are times where it's difficult. There are situations where, and I do it every time anyway, because again, like I said, I'm sitting there in that chair or wherever I am. I'm like, God, help me. In my mind, I'm saying, God, help me. Give me the
Yeah.
words to speak. I don't know what to tell these people, or I don't know what to tell this person. Give me the wisdom, because God, you have to help them. They don't, you know, I can't help them, but you can. And
Yeah.
so that's, a portion of it. And there are times where I'm like, you get people that are always in your office.
Mm-hmm.
You get people that are there for strange reasons. I mean, there's all kinds of stuff, and we're talking about, if you're a pastor, you're wanting to be a pastor, you gotta be real careful. Again, teach us all that. As a man, when you don't want to counsel women by yourself, because, I mean, I've been hit on,
Yeah.
you know,
Trying to get you caught up.
trying to get you caught up, and I'm gonna tell you, expect it. It's gonna happen, you know,
Mm-hmm.
those kind of things, and you gotta be prepared for that, to be firm, to not get wrapped up. So you have to be very careful, because some a counseling session it can be a trap.
Mm-hmm.
People, because it can be a very emotional situation, and you got this vulnerable crying woman who's like, oh, I just, I don't get any attention and things like that. And the devil, he'll lie to you and say, you better have your heart right again. And
For
so
real.
certain situations, obviously I never counsel without, being able to be seen by everybody. I've started counseling
Yeah.
on the platform very recently, or I'll make sure, I'm not alone, because that's one of the difficulties, that's there, because you're a pastor, but you're still a human being,
Right.
and people and the devil will definitely try to throw things in there. I mean, uh, in the midst of you counseling, you
Yeah.
know, where you're counseling and you're casting things down, and you
Yeah.
know, you're praying, and but yeah, sometimes, man, some sometimes people come to you. You know, some things are difficult.
Yeah.
Somebody like, Pastor, why did this person die? Or, situations like you don't have the answers for,
Yeah.
because they come to you like, oh, Pastor, like Pastor knows everything. The pastor doesn't know everything,
Right.
and there are times where you have to, graciously say, we need to just trust God. And so, we need to believe God, and that God knows the end from the beginning, because pastor doesn't know everything. And you have to
Right.
be able to be humble and not just try to give whatever answer just because, oh, I'm pastor and, I have the answers to
Yeah.
everything. No, you don't.
Definitely. Yeah. You don't like. Yeah. I think that's important. Kind of like what you said, where it's like, if you don't have the answer for something, don't try to make one up for appearances or something like that, because that
Right.
is how you mess up your congregation, bro. That's a terrible idea.
Yes.
Don't do that. I had a few things I wanted to mention.
Okay.
Kind of going back to when you were saying that you don't counsel alone. I think that's another aspect of why it's important that you're sent out with your wife and all that. Not that because you're committed and all that. Like obviously that's important, but also just the fact that there have been many instances where I'm in the church, with my parents, and dad needs somebody to stay back to hold him accountable, I guess, or to make sure nothing, you know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
And mom will be there, and and mom's there. She's always gonna be there because I mean, where else is she gonna be? She's with her husband. She's with us. You know what I mean? So that's another thing that I kind of wanted to mention, where it's also important in that aspect where you always need someone that you're working with and that holds you accountable, and especially being a pastor,
Mm-hmm.
you know, you need someone that holds you accountable 24/7. You know what I
Yes.
mean?
Yes. We're
And then,
Go ahead.
go ahead. No, I want you to say what
It's
you're
that
gonna say.
we're not self-made. You know.
Mm,
You know. We have. If you think you've arrived, then you're in trouble. We need
yeah,
to always be humble, always have accountability. And I tell every guy, there's some guys like, oh, I guess, they deal with issues of lust and, different things in that arena that, oh, it'll all be cured once I'm married. Once I'm married and I go out, I tell guys all the time, listen, you're still a man. You
yeah.
know,
You're
you
still
know,
yeah,
you could be married, you could have your wife, have a great relationship. You know what? But you still have to live in your flesh. So it's like you better
yeah,
keep your heart right. You
yeah.
know, and you have to maintain. So there's a lot of areas of it's a disciplined life. It is a
Hmm.
life, and your life is on display. Everybody's watching you, and so I also tell people, I said, listen, as a pastor, you will be criticized.
Yeah.
Okay,
Ooh,
you could be
yeah,
a great preacher, you could have a good marriage, you could have good kids. People will find something to say about you, and I expect it. I said,
yeah,
man, they told Jesus he was a drunkard and filled with demons, and I mean, he's Jesus Christ. I'm just
yeah.
me. You
Well,
know
that's just Joseph's son and all that.
exactly, and
Trying
so
to,
I
yeah,
expect it. Like I know, and so you have to know that comes with the territory. Like people are going to say negative things, people are going to gossip, they're going to but you can't. I can't allow those things to steer me in a different direction. My confidence is that I have a right relationship with God. I love God. I love my
yeah.
wife. You know, um, and I pray for my children.
That's crazy. That's crazy. Oh, never mind.
I pray
I
for my
thought you weren't gonna mention us.
no, no, I pray for my wife. Because I know those kind of things happen, but it's part of the territory. And
Yeah.
you have to move forward.
Yeah, that's definitely super important. You're stronger than me, for sure, man. Because and I've heard this, and just a warning also to all the women listening, that apparently pastors' wives get just as much, if not more, things said about them by people in the church.
Mm-hmm.
Is what I've heard, and it's you got to deal with that for real. You got to deal with that, and that can be difficult.
Yeah.
So just know that it can happen. I remember one time we were in service, and it was during a revival. A revival is when we have a guest preacher come in and preach sermons. So we had a revival, and the preacher he had said to my mom, he said, "You got to know this," because God had spoken to him with some things to say, and he said, "There are those in the church that speak negatively about you," or something to that effect.
Mm-hmm.
And my mom, I mean, her face didn't change at all. She was like, "Yep, stone cold." But me, bro, I was like, "Let me know who's talking bad about my mom. Come see
Yeah.
me." And I guess that would have been, if I had done something like that, that would be me wrong, because even in that, you got to control your emotions
Yes.
and everything. You can't be emotional about things, especially dealing with other people and all that. You cannot, because people are people regardless. And as a Christian, you got to do that, and as a pastor especially, you have to just have, well, God with you. I'm gonna say that, because sometimes you can't do it by yourself. So you're like, "God, take this anger from me, please."
Yes.
you know
You got to bring those things to the altar. Always. And like your mom's a tough cookie. You
Yeah.
know, um, but she has a good relationship, very good relationship with God. She has a very real prayer life, and there's she has a lot of wisdom, and but still,
Hmm.
as tough as you see your mom, I know the other side of your mom that you may not
Yeah.
see, and those difficult times, and because those words again, people speak about you, it's a form of witchcraft, and so there's not like an invisible boundary. Those words in the supernatural begin to weigh upon her mind or my mind or something like that, and so why it's so important that the as a pastor, the healthy marriage, the good
Yeah.
communication with your wife, all those things, because and praying, before I pray for anybody else, I pray for my wife. I worship God. I give God all the praise and glory first when I pray, and the very first person I pray for every time is my wife. Every time I pray for
Word.
her first, and then I commence to pray for you guys, and
Praying for
then everybody
everybody.
else, and then
Oh yeah, nice. We got a spot.
yeah, you got a spot, you got a place on the prayer list, and
I mean,
so yeah, so that's it. Those are the other side of pastoring that people don't see. Again, it's not just a platform, it's not just the sermons. It's a way of life. It is a calling that requires all of you, your time, your energy, your strength, your marriage, your children. Um, your mind, your spirit. You know, um, which is why, again, I say it again, you better be somebody that prays, not
yeah,
the little weak little prayer life. You have to
yeah,
be completely dependent on God.
yeah, yeah. Great. I had some other things I wanted to ask, but
Okay,
I feel like that's a good end. Unless you
okay.
want to,
It's
they're
up
real
to you.
quick. Um. Okay, I'll just ask them really quickly because they're kind of going back, but I like that. Um. I know that as a pastor, sometimes counseling doesn't always come to you. You have to go to it.
Right.
And I feel as though sometimes that can be um probably stressful. I don't know, where you have to confront someone on something they've done, or something that they refuse to deal with or realize that they need to deal with at all. So you had to bring these things up as a pastor.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I can imagine that that takes, well, obviously the mind of God and an enormous amount of wisdom where you can see these things and know that, okay, I need to reach out and do something about this. And I need to speak with them as their pastor
Right.
because I see where this road leads, or I see, that they're I don't know, they're on the verge of being out of the church entirely or not saved, or
Mm-hmm.
and you can see those things, and it's like you can't do that, like Dad was saying, with your prayer life and with having a connection with God. You can't do any of these things. You can't really be effective in your church. You can't help people by yourself. You can't do that. You cannot. You can't. I don't know how anybody would feel comfortable just being an outside observer looking in and saying, yeah, I think I'm gonna go talk to them about their problems or something. Like it, it just doesn't happen. You know what I mean? It happens when God puts it on your heart and lays it on you that, hey, I've put this person in your mind for a reason. Go talk to them. And you can, I mean, that won't happen if you're not talking to God, if you're not praying.
Right. And it's not always this supernatural experience. There are times where God
Right.
has put people on my heart, while I'm praying. Um, other times, some things are just obvious. You see that a tree by its fruit,
Mm-hmm.
and that's the other side of pastoring too. Is that it's not always, um, again, where you have to deal with stuff. You have to correct people, and it's not always well received. Because correct,
Oh yeah.
if whom a father loves, he chastens, right? There's correction. You bring correction if you love them. You don't love them if you don't correct them. you know
Right.
and so you
I
can't
know that.
you can't always be um, you know Mr. Good Guy. If there's issues of sin, you have to deal with it, or it will spread. It will affect other people's lives and ruin that individual's life. And so
Yeah.
um, yeah, and so you have to, um, like you say, go to people. Like you said, you see things, you're like, hey, I've noticed this or whatever, and you bring correction, and that correction is a way to give them direction. Hey, you're
Mm-hmm.
off track, come back to right relationship, or hey, there are issues here that I'm seeing what's going on. And it's a way to really try to get them to open up, and it's always to try to get them to come back to Christ. But again, not everybody, no one likes discipline, no one likes correction. If you got a right heart, then you'll appreciate it. Like Pastor
Right.
Campbell, one of leaders in our fellowship, and leader of our wing, the fellowship, he always says you never know what's in the person until you tell them no.
Yeah.
And that is very real. um, I've seen people accept it, hey, this is true, I do need to change. Or you'd see people like, you don't know what you're talking about, I think this. And so you got to be prepared to deal with that, correct that. And you know and with that, back to the marriage thing again, always comes back to home life. I don't bring that stuff home.
Oh no way.
I,
Yeah. Don't do that.
I don't bring those things home. That my one thing my wife has always said: ignorance is bliss when it comes to issues. I don't finish in a counseling session and go home. Hey, baby, this is what happened. This is what they're talking about. I would rather have her just focus on Jesus and life and anything
Yeah.
else. I'm not gonna just burden her with issues because there are things that you know she's not gonna handle. Like you know um, the scripture says like the wife is the weaker vessel, and that has nothing
Mm-hmm.
to do with strength or ability. It has to do with there's certain things that she can't contain or able to hold inside. It affects her differently. A
Yeah.
man, we could hear things sometimes and like, okay, and it'd be like water on the duck's back, or you could deal with it and move on. where sometimes your wife might dwell on those things. It might affect her more emotionally, and you know, and you don't want that, you know.
No.
And so I spare her from that as often as I can. Obviously, some things end up on her doorstep, so to speak, but
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah. So, just to recap, I guess, when you feel that you're called to preach and all that, make sure that your heart's right, obviously. Make sure that you're talking to God. Um, Make sure that you are focusing on your marriage and that you don't let it, fall to be second place to anything.
Hmm.
Um, Other than obviously your relationship with God, but in that, God tells you to love your wife. So it's part of your relationship with God is, taking care of your wife and loving her and all that. And obviously the same goes for respecting your husband, being there for him when, because you guys are a team. Um, and knowing that even if you fail or you mess up or you don't see what you thought you were gonna see when you go out and whatnot, that God's still on the throne, that He's still there, and that even counseling and all that, that you got to make sure that that God's on the throne again, and that you're not leaning on your own strength, your own brain,
Hmm.
and all that. Just that you're really having a connection with God, praying and all that. So like in everything, just make sure that God's a part of it. Make sure that God has involvement, and then, I mean, it'll go good.
Amen.
Awesome. So that's the first half. I know y'all didn't know we were gonna do a second half with the pastor's perspective segment, but we are,
Okay.
which is crazy. The reason is because I kind of want, not that I kind of want to, but that it's important that people know, kind of like what we were saying earlier, that pastors are people too. You know what I mean? They live life just the same way you live life. They raise their children. They experience the world. They support the commanders, and
Oh Lord.
they go
Let's
through
not talk
troubles all the
about them.
time. So I don't know. We go through real life. Not we. I'm not a pastor, but everyone does, and pastors are included in that we.
Hmm.
Um. So I guess for the second half, our first topic that I kind of wanted to talk to you about, because I've been thinking about it a lot. I've been thinking about it for a few months now because there was this. Anyway, we'll talk about it. Um, what is like your opinion on media? I guess like media has not been the same as it used to be, and
Oh
I've
no.
seen it change, but you've definitely seen it change a lot
Yes.
more.
Yeah. Especially since you
And
think I was around before the invention of television.
well, he was around before bottled water. I don't know if you guys know that.
I was. I remember when they started
It's
bottling
crazy.
water.
He remembers when bottled water came out.
Yes.
This is a
I
crazy
was like, water is
statement.
free. Why are they selling it? You just open the faucet and drink
No
it.
way.
But why are they putting it
No
in bottles?
way.
I do remember that. Yes.
Oh,
Um,
that's hilarious.
but yeah, entertainment.
Yeah.
It has definitely, definitely changed from, uh, you know, from my youth. One, I remember when TV used to go off. In the middle, at midnight every night, TV would go off. Because uh, those are the powers that be decided, hey, you've had enough for the day. TV's going off. You got to get up and go to work or to school the next day, and so television would go off.
Wow.
Yes, it would turn off, and so this was, then of course, then cable came into the picture, and that started changing everything because it was watch as much as you want when you want it. All the different channels and the different things, but the content has really changed. Not that the things didn't exist before,
Right.
you know, but they slowly started bringing things in that were more vulgar, less, you know, uh, I remember, you know, just certain shows were just family oriented and stuff like that, and they used to, if there was a curse word, I mean, they used to bleep out the A word and
Right. Yeah.
bleep out the B word.
Donkey
Right.
and all that. You
And
know what
so,
I mean?
right. So, so now that's just regular. That's nothing. Even the ratings have changed. PG. I don't know if they even make PG movies anymore, but PG was, maybe you need parental guidance, or rated G.
Yeah, G was just guidance. And it
Yeah,
didn't have to be a parent or
but
anything.
now, I mean, it's just
It's the same ratings, but it's like,
right.
how do these have the same rating?
Exactly. So things have changed. Cartoons. I mean, I grew up on the Smurfs, and Ducktales, and He-Man.
He Man.
When He-Man was really a
No
man.
way we just said that at the same time.
When he was really a man, and then
Nice.
and GI Joe and stuff like that. But where the show always had a message at the
Yeah.
end. But now, I mean, stuff has gotten weird. I mean,
Strange.
awkward, strange. I mean, even the way they draw things is just weird. I mean, weird looking characters.
Whack.
I mean, and now what's really I notice is that adult content now comes in the form of cartoons.
Yeah. Yeah.
Where cartoons used to be,
For kids.
For kids.
Or
But
for
now,
younger audiences, but now it's like,
right.
I don't, it can be anything. And sometimes what I think is bad about this is that the bright colors and everything of cartoons attract children.
Mm-hmm.
So then, they'll be like, ooh, cartoons, and they'll be watching stuff they shouldn't be watching. But also, sometimes the cartoons are made for children. But it's like, how is this made for children?
Right.
And I've seen that where it's like, okay, this is peculiar.
Mm-hmm. I'm actually going to minister on that pretty soon, but we'll talk about that later.
Behind the scenes.
And right. And then, but yeah, and I've seen it. What's crazy, I've seen, that song, I don't know what the song is, but television rules the nations. You know what I'm talking about?
What on earth is that?
I don't know. But anyway.
No, I don't know what that is.
Okay, but it's true. The media does affect and control the masses. So whatever is popular on TV, TV is like even an old statement now, old things, but whatever's on media, whether it be music, the artists, or whatever is on a show, whatever that is popular, whatever is popular on that is what controls the masses. It's what everybody else is doing. It's what everybody else is accepting. Their ideologies, their ideas about life and sexuality and religion are directed and controlled by media. And I've seen as the media changes, society changes. If a show comes out and it makes something acceptable, it's like a mind games where it's like a slow dripping poison that now has shifted the culture of the world, of the earth, and sadly even the church, where things were back in the day. You had TV shows where, like I Love Lucy, where husband and wife, just because it's on, even though they're married, they slept on separate beds.
Yeah.
To now,
For TV.
you got multiple partners, 2 dads, 2 moms. You got, I mean, the list is endless now, and it's where it's accepted and normal, and what was normal is now abnormal. It's
Yeah.
strange to people. Faithfulness is a strange thing. Purity is a strange thing. It's an awkward thing to be pure and to be, so now it's like perversion is the accepted norm, and it's in every form. The media has a huge part to play on that. Both visual and audio. What's audible. Just like music.
Yeah.
Really affects the masses.
Yeah. I agree completely. Um, I guess I can kind of get into why I've been thinking about it, but it's where like I'll look back on my youth. I guess I mean I'm still young compared to you. I'm super young, but in in, in my youth when I was watching shows and stuff, and it would be things like Cartoon Network, like
Mm-hmm.
Johnny Test. I don't know if y'all know what that is, and Backyardigans. If we go even further back, um, watching
Veggie
uh,
Tales.
Veggie Tales. I mean, Veggie Tales is still good. I can watch Veggie Tales now. Generator Rex. I was watching that. Watching.
Did you watch Ben
Um,
10? Were you a Ben 10 watcher or
I
no?
did. I did. I was a Ben 10 watcher, but I watched. Actually, I ended up watching Ben 10 Ultimate Alien. I didn't watch the original show. I was. I guess that came out before my time, so I watched the new one where he's older and he's driving and
Oh,
all
okay.
that. I'm trying to think of shows that I was watching in a very particular age range because in my early teens into late teens, I was watching shows like I watched anime for a little bit there, so like Naruto and whatnot. Um,
Didn't like that.
I was watching. I mean, Naruto's okay. I was
No.
watching. I was watching. What is that show called? Max Steel. Yeah, I was watching Max Steel. I was watching Ninja Turtles, and this is like
Okay.
16, 15, and whatnot. The reason I bring up all these shows that I was watching at this age is because recently there have been these shows that have come out for people that age that I'm like, no way,
Mm-hmm.
this is for you. Like, okay, so the first one I'll bring up, which is, I guess it's not worse, it's just as bad, or but is this show 13 Reasons Why, which is kind of old now. I know you're like, oh, stop bringing up 13 Reasons Why. Hey, bro, it's important because it's a
I'm
part of
clueless
media.
to what you're talking about, but go ahead.
Incredible. That means I get to explain it to you. 13 Reasons Why is based off of a book, the first season. And the book is about a pretty sad story of this girl who was going through um, some, I guess, some trials in high school, teasing, bullying, really feeling out of place, feeling unloved and whatnot. And she felt as though she had no reason to live anymore. Um, Trigger warning. I do have to put that in here. Like trigger warning is I guess the new term, but like I'm about to talk about some serious topics here that are presented in the show, and I will probably talk about that in the next show I talk about too. So this is a warning here. If you're sensitive to that kind of information, before I say anything, I'm going to be talking about that. Okay, got that out of the way. And so it's about how she kills herself, right? But before she had killed herself, she took the time to make 13 tapes that she recorded of people. Like each tape was about a certain person, and it was about how they were one of the reasons that she killed herself, or one of the
Wow.
things that, yeah. And it was like, golly. And I don't know. I feel like the what it was would have, it probably worked better in the book because I don't know. I feel like books are more serious, They don't have the need to add extra drama
Yeah, but people
and
don't
all
read
these.
anymore.
I know it's true. We didn't mention that part of media because that doesn't affect anything. Who knows what kinds of books are coming out? Nobody cares, which is sad. You guys should read. But yeah, so I'm sure it worked better in the book, but in the show, it's like this crazy story, and I'm like, this is a crazy topic, but in that, while I wouldn't want to, like, if I were a parent, I wouldn't want my kids watching that at all. Um, it would be silly of me to say that these things aren't things that affect children and young people in their lives. You know what I mean? Like, these are real feelings, real emotions, but it was just the way they went about presenting these things in this show, where it was just the most raunchy and vulgar. And I feel as though they put certain things in the show that probably weren't in the book because they wanted that shock factor, or that that reactions out of people, like, no way they're gonna put this in the episode, and then they put it in the episode. And it's like, okay, but you didn't have to write this and record it
It's
and
like
put it
they
on TV.
put a lot of unnecessary things, like things that you could have maybe, not that I would ever watch the show, but they now people is like they get really explicit, like things that they probably would have just mentioned in passing before, or maybe an innuendo. Now it's like, let me give you the full details. Let me just spell it out for you. I mean, they do that in the music now. Before there was just an innuendo, and now it's like, I'm gonna tell you exactly body part, et cetera, and the shows as well. And so, again, I definitely believe, people will make fun of us for saying things like this, but that, the devil, the demonic realm is really involved in Hollywood in so many ways. The devil was in charge of entertainment in heaven, so to speak, in charge of the worship, again, and it moved the masses, and he's still behind. He's still doing the same thing in music, in the ministry, and people are swayed. And like you're talking about, these different emotions and things that, those are the doors that open people up to spirits.
Yeah.
And I really believe it's a huge factor as to why we're seeing so much more, again, suicide or promiscuous activity, or this confusion about gender and sexuality, because there are a lot more people have opened themselves up to these things, and you're like, where did this person come from, and why do they believe, why are they having these feelings? And a lot of it comes from the kind of things that they're digesting into their minds, and through the windows of their soul and their eyes. And it's insane. And so media is a huge thing. And so another thing that's different from one in my generation is accessibility. It wasn't always accessible. It really wasn't. You had to go to the back of some video VCR store to get see some
adult content,
some
and
adult
stuff like
content.
that.
Now, I mean, you're walking around with it in your pocket, and another
or on
thing,
a billboard somewhere.
exactly. So, another thing about when you're talking about you guys in your youth, we were very mindful, of putting blockers, or only allowing you guys to play on the weekends, because we wanted you guys to focus on your schoolwork. And we turn off the internet. I remember we're turning off the internet at a certain time of night, because really it's like things change once it gets dark.
Yeah, that's true.
You feel like it's more secretive, nobody's watching, and those things, they're temptations, and there's so many things that are out there, and it's really affected. I mean, again, it's affected even the church. I've seen it. I've seen media. Again, in all my years of ministry and being saved, I've seen media affect Christianity as a whole, in a lot of ways as well. And
So you were mentioning that as a parent, you were doing things to make sure that, like, you weren't just like letting us do whatever we wanted to do. You were strict to an extent, and you had a big part in the media that we were consuming as children.
Right.
I want to mention this. I want to say it because some people may feel like, oh my gosh, you have such strict parents. They didn't want you to do anything. They can't just let you live your life, blah bitty blah, blue bitty blue. And it's like, bruh, I'm able to live my life now in a incredible capacity. I'm not gonna flex on y'all, but I'm for sure gonna flex on y'all. My life is great. Um, and I and I definitely think that that plays a part because of my parents, because of the things that they instilled in me when I was young, because of the media that they allowed me to watch, because some things I just don't need to see, and I don't know. I feel like maybe people feel like their kids will turn out sheltered or something, or they'll turn out lame. I'm not lame, bro. I'm probably cooler than all your kids. So, no, I'm sorry. I promise you that's not the case. It's more about, you're not being a big brother. You see, they don't even know what Big Brother is. They didn't read that book. Big Brother is from the book 1984, written by George Orwell. Take a look. Anyway, you're not being this police over your children by monitoring the things they do. You are allowed to do that, and not only are you allowed to do that, if you are a good parent, you should be doing that.
Yes.
At least I'm not a parent, but look, he just agreed with me. So that's what I'm saying. Where I never felt like my parents were hindering me from. I don't know. I guess this also comes from explanation, because my parents, while they took things away from us, they would tell us, you got to go to sleep, or, I don't want you guys looking at X, Y, and Z. And I was like, okay, awesome. You've explained to us your wishes. And obviously, since I love you and I respect you, I'm going to respect what you've told me to do. Maybe sometimes, leaving your kids in the dark is it can be cause for them to seek out what you're taking from them on their own. And then you can start having those repercussions where it's like, oh, see, if I just showed it to them under my supervision so that they would know this is what I don't want you to look at, that would have made more sense. When obviously that doesn't make sense either. But it's like, I don't know. There are a lot of facets to media as it relates to children, but also everything, just parenting in general. Like, Dad, for you, do you feel as though, like, because obviously I don't think you were super duper strict, but do you feel as though parents have now become so not strict where they will let anything go, or they're just too relaxed as parents? Is this a thing that you deal with ever in your brain?
Well, first, going back to you, we used to whoop y'all.
So, yeah.
Yeah, so not that we weren't strict. We were strict. We didn't have to be, helicopter parents, as they try to say, because you guys, we trained you guys from a very early age where all I had to do was look at you guys, and you guys knew I need to straighten up, But yes, it has changed. What, like you were saying earlier, people feel like, and again, the culture has made people feel like if you don't give your kids, everything that they want, or if you restrict certain things from them, then you're being a bad parent, or it's child abuse. And really, it's child abuse by letting your kids do whatever they want. That's the real child abuse, because parents aren't parenting. They let the device parent them instead of disciplining them. Hey, instead of telling them to sit down and shut up, or be quiet if you don't want to say shut up. Hey, sit down, be quiet,
Which is true.
Right.
We didn't say shut up in the household when I was
we didn't. And so listen to me. I'm the parent, you're the child. Now parents are just like, well, it's just easier. Let me give the child a device. And, let the device parent them. And it's terrible. It is terrible. Because now the device is nothing, really. The kid's still bad with the device. And, that whole let the kids do what they want. That is just probably one of the worst things that I've seen, where now they make the parent out to be the bad guy for disciplining,
Yeah.
And again, where do these ideas come from? The media.
True.
These ideas didn't just pop out of thin air. These ideas are ideologies that are pushed. And so now you got the kids in the schools, they teach this stuff. And so, God forbid you discipline your kid or take something from them, the kid runs back and says it in school. And then next thing you know, they're calling the authorities on you, because you're not, you know,
Yeah.
because you're restricting your child from having, a cell phone or whatever.
Right. Or something like that. And I want to mention this because a lot of people may hear that and say, "Oh, you guys are conspiracy theorists," or something like that, or like the media is trying to instill in our children these things, and that sounds. I mean, yeah, that sounds stereotypical, like um, stereotypical conspiracy theorist.
Mm-hmm.
But the difference is that, I mean, you don't need to say those things to see that there's an obvious change,
Right.
an obvious difference. Like, I was a kid at one point, and, I had the strict teachings of my parents and the strict treatment and all that. And now, I'm incredibly, well, I mean, look, I promise you I'm not just lying and being prideful. I'm respectful. Um, I'm studious when I want to be.
Mm-hmm.
I I enjoy making my parents happy. I love my parents. I don't ever want to fight with my parents ever. I try to be respectful to everyone I'm around. I try to be helpful, And I'm not just listing all these cool things just to look good, but I'm saying all those things are things that I feel came from the discipline I had because I see they're people, but they're very young people who, maybe don't have these same experiences. And, I've gone to school with them, or now I'm in college with them. So they're on their own, they're adults, and I can see their lives. And it's like, the classic phrase, didn't your mom teach you, or didn't your parents? And the answer is no. And you can tell that without, you don't need to ask them for
Mm-hmm.
real because you can see it in their life. So it's not like the media's training your children to do this and you shouldn't, it's like
Yeah.
parents are there to guide and discipline their children, and they're not.
Right.
And this is just a fact.
Yeah.
And you can see it. I did want to mention that.
Yeah. And the scripture does say to train up a child in the way that he should go.
Yeah.
And that's very important. And really, I thank God, and I thank the Lord that you guys have turned out the way that you have. You know, I was telling somebody the other day, you know what, I have two sons in college. One's in high school, but done with high school, taking college classes, and and that's all great and dandy. But I'm more excited about the fact that my sons, they're all saved. All three of my boys are,
Yeah.
have a relationship with God. And to me, that is more important than any education, anything. Those things are pluses. They're respectful and all those different things. But, God, that my prayers that God, that my sons make it to heaven, that they serve you. And so even though you could raise your child and discipline them in the area of media, you guys still have to make your own choices. You know,
Right.
you guys got to a certain age, and it's like, because we could have done all that. Because there are some parents that do that. They're disciplined. They have their kids in church, and then their kids end up wilding out.
Yeah. Yep.
And but like you say, you train them up. The Bible says, that they'll come back.
Mm-hmm.
You deposited the good and the gospel in their hearts, and that um, prayerfully that those seeds, if they do become that prodigal son or daughter, that they'll come back
Yeah.
because of the way that you raise them, what you put in their heart, and they'll see for themselves. Because imagine if you never taught them that. they'll go out in the world and never realize, hey, this is filthy, this is
Yeah.
disgusting, this isn't right. But if you put that in them before, later on they'll hopefully, prayerfully recognize, hey, man, I remember my mom or my dad telling me these things about how filthy the world is and how terrible and what sin does to you, and it'll cause them to come back. And so that's the prayer.
Yeah. I know this firsthand where, I think it's just even just the knowledge, because your parents will teach you these things where, sometimes kids are doing things and it's because it's how they feel, and it's their reaction to maybe the things that are going on around them, or something that they want to do in response to something else, right? And they'll just do these things, and I guess it'll make them feel better for a time. So, they'll do it. But, for us, me and my brothers, I'm talking about, there are things that we know are right, that we know are wrong, that we know have certain consequences, that we know lead to certain things. And we know these things not because we figured it out, like some children have to do, where they have to learn these things the hard way, but we know these things because our parents taught it to us. And I think that's one of the things that, maybe people don't see it that way, but it's like, because my father or my mother taught me this and that, even when I'm doing something because it makes me feel good, or because, I want to do it, never in my mind am I thinking this is the right thing to do. Even if, your kids might still do it. They might still do the things that you don't want them to, but you've instilled in them at least the idea, the notion that they have to face consequences. They have to take responsibility for the things they've done. And that's one of the main things that I see a lot, where these kids are growing up and they don't take responsibility. They don't understand. I mean, I don't know how, but they don't really get right from wrong. Like, right would be whatever they say is right, whatever they deem to be correct. And these are qualities that you learn as a youth. And if you don't learn them, it could affect your real life. You know what I mean? It can affect.
And I wondered, talking about that, dude. So remember I was talking about like media back in the days, things I used to watch. They used to have like a message at the end, they don't do drugs or whatever.
Yeah.
Does the media nowadays, does it have some kind of lesson, or is it just like, hey, this is fun, indulge in this, and there are no, like, do they ever show consequences? Because back in the day,
Man,
they will always show like a consequence, or there's some kind of lesson that was learned. I don't know if they still do that, or is it just like, this is
they
fun?
do. They do. They
Okay.
still show that. But the issue, I feel like they show it in the worst way possible. You know what I mean? Like, there's this other show called Euphoria, and there's this high schooler, bro. He's in high school. I mean, this can happen to high schoolers, so I'm not trying to be insensitive to anyone that's going through anything similar or, adjacent to this. But he's in high school and he is like a hardcore drug addict,
Mm.
right? And so
This
maybe
is
in
a
media in the
show.
past, yeah. So maybe in media in the past it would be like, don't do drugs, kids, because it's bad for you. But this show, I guess it shows the consequences technically, because it shows this guy, I mean, strung out, and
Mm.
it's crazy. I mean, I haven't watched the show personally, so I don't know all the details, and I don't want to know. I'm not watching that show, never, ever. But it's like these consequences that they show, where it's like, okay, you've shown the consequences, but I don't know, man.
It's like
The way
they glorify the
they
show.
kind of yeah, they make it glamorous almost.
Right,
Like, there's
exactly.
this whole, this picture of it, and then some things, they show the consequences of, but it's like the subject matter and the the person, the target audience, it doesn't seem to line up. And I mean, it does, but it's like, like,
right? Are they It's like almost like they're encouraging it.
yeah, like they show the consequences of, I don't know, of adultery. Can I call it adultery? I mean,
Fornication.
what? Fornication. There it is. The consequences of that. But the subjects in the show and the people watching are meant to be, at least in the show, they're meant to be children, like 15, 16. And then the people watching are the same age.
Okay, that's what I was going to ask you. Is that the target audience?
Yeah. I mean, what adult is going to watch a show about high schoolers? Who cares?
Well,
I don't watch shows about high school.
Yeah, but the thing is, if they're putting all that perversion in there, adults are watching it. Especially those sick-minded.
Oh, that's yucky, bro. That's yucky.
No,
sir.
That's the culture.
Yeah. So what I'm saying is that, they show. I feel like the only thing they show in media now is consequence, I guess, which sounds like a good thing, but it's like everything is negative. There's no positive. There's no positivity anywhere.
Wow.
Like in the past, like in my experience, the shows would be like something good is happening, but then someone does something bad or does something wrong, and there's consequence. And it's like, don't do that. In these shows, it's like someone's doing something wrong every episode. Nothing is going right. Nobody's happy. The only happiness people get is from like some relationship that they have with some other person. And then that relationship is obviously going to lead to more unhappiness, or the happiness comes from a drug. And they're like, I feel happy now because I'm doing heroin or something. And it's like, bruh, this is depressing. That's why I cannot watch these shows anymore, man. I can't watch media as it is, not because, I don't know. I feel like, it's just depressing. Who wants to watch that and be depressed? This sucks. I'm sad on my own sometimes. Poison. It's like, yeah. So to answer your question, they do show consequences, but it's not a good thing. I don't know. I feel as though the media is just crazy. Crazy. Everything's gotten very adult, I'll say. Very sexual, or, these kinds of issues that, are just ridiculous. Now, that's not to say that, like I've been saying over and over, that people this young don't deal with these kinds of things. They do, They do. I can't be ignorant to that. Like, even probably you, when you were 16, 17, you probably dealt with these kinds of things as well,
Mm-hmm.
And,
I did.
But
still, and that's the thing. People try to make the argument, well, that stuff has always been around. Like, yeah, sin has always been around. Perversion, etc., has always been around. It just now is just more widespread and more widely accepted as a norm than in my generation.
That's true. So in terms of like parenting and all that, just be mindful. Don't don't be lax, in this, because that's the worst thing you could do to your child. You made them cry one time today. Okay, awesome. That's you want to avoid that, so you'll avoid parenting. They're gonna have a lot of days crying later because you didn't do your job. You didn't raise them.
Yes.
Trust me. I know this to be true. I know children. Well, they're not. Well, yeah, they were children. Where I'm like, oh yeah, I'm so excited. I'm about to go off to college. What have you been doing? Oh yeah, I'm raising my child. I'm like, no way. And I don't know. That comes with decision making, and I'm not going to be insensitive to these people, of course, because I don't know. That's a hard thing. It's a hard thing, but that comes with decision making, and it comes with the things that you have to learn from youth. You know what I mean? So, you know, yeah. Again, this is actually going back to what we were talking about in the first half and the second half. Do everything with God involved. You know what I mean? You know, it's like the cheat code, bruh. Pray.
The cheat code of life.
Yeah. So, that marks the end of this first ever pastor's perspective. It was pretty exciting. Honestly, I can't wait for the next one. I'm not sure if I'm going to get someone else on it or if it's going to be Dad again. Probably Dad, but we'll see. I hope you guys are just as excited for the pastor's perspective as I am, as we are. It's pretty cool to have this kind of segment in the Frontline Youth podcast. I forgot to say a secret word, so I'll say one now. Wallet. Boom. That's the secret word. You know why it's wallet? Because you need to stash all these things into your brain and your mind, just like money in a wallet. That's not why I'm just saying stuff. The secret word is wallet. Please put that in the comments. Try to fit it into a sentence so we know that you're a real one. Made it to the end of the episode. I'm pretty sure my dad's hearing this for the first time, so that means he's not a real one. That's pretty crazy. He's on the podcast and has never, ever relayed to us that he knows the secret word, but that's okay.
I don't know the secret word.
Be better. Be better, guys. So yeah, thank you guys so much for listening. Please write down what you think down in the comments or DM us on Instagram. Let us know, what you're thinking, how you're feeling about this podcast, how you're feeling about the way things are going. And yeah, thank you so much. This is us signing off. Yes. Goodbye.
Goodbye.
I bet. The episode is done.
Do I have to
ask Elijah to come help you? Ask Elijah to come help you.
He left downstairs.